Okay, let's try and unpack this. You want to understand if maybe a large, publicly traded company might be, well, engaging in discriminatory hiring practices. It really feels like trying to see through a solid wall sometimes, doesn't it? How could you possibly get a clear picture from the outside looking in?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex challenge. I mean, companies control so much of their own internal data, their processes.
Absolutely. But this is where the source you shared for this deep dive is just, well, incredibly valuable. We're looking at this economic research analysis, right, by Dr. Quentin Jackson of the Meridian College of Leadership.
Mm.
And its core mission, from what I'm gathering, is to really provide a practical roadmap showing how someone can actually gather meaningful data.
Exactly, and insights on this very issue,
Mm.
even from the outside.
Right.
What's particularly insightful about this analysis, I think, is its focus on leveraging publicly available information
Mhm.
and, understanding the formal avenues that are actually available for
Yeah.
investigation.
Yeah.
It's not just theory. It details concrete steps.
Which is exactly why this deep dive is tailored just for you. Maybe you're interested in corporate transparency, or you want to understand how DEI efforts are analyzed, perhaps. Or maybe you're just curious about the kind of the nuts and bolts of investigating potential discrimination. This analysis gives you a detailed framework. It's drawn directly from the material you provided.
Yeah, it essentially gives you a structured way, sort of a method, to approach a question that feels, well, inherently opaque.
Okay, so let's jump right in then. The first major area this analysis seems to focus on is tapping into publicly available data. The EEO1 report comes up straight away. What exactly is that, and why does this research highlight it as such a crucial starting point?
The EO1 report, yeah, it's fundamental. Basically, it's an annual filing. It's required for publicly traded companies above a certain size, and it details their workforce demographics broken down by job category, race, and sex.
Okay, so it's like a mandated snapshot. Who works where within the company structure based on those categories?
Precisely. And the analysis points out that its real power comes from the ability to perform critical comparisons. You can compare demographics within the company itself.
How so?
Well, looking for imbalances maybe at different job levels, say between entry-level roles and leadership positions.
And I guess you can also benchmark that company data against external metrics, right? Is that part of it?
That's absolutely key. Comparing the company's workforce composition against, say, industry averages, or even more critically, against the demographics of the relevant labor market for specific roles. That comparison can reveal significant disparities. And as the analysis notes, large gaps here can be, well, strong indicators that something might be happening in the hiring process or promotion.
Got it. Okay. So the EEO1 is about the hard numbers, the comparisons. Where else does this research suggest looking for publicly accessible information? What other sources?
Well, beyond those sort of official government filings, the analysis really emphasizes reviewing the company's own public-facing materials.
Like their annual reports.
Things like their corporate responsibility reports, yes, or investor relations materials, maybe specific reports they publish on DEI initiatives.
So basically, looking at what the company says about itself and its efforts.
Yes, exactly. But not just, taking it at face value. Reviewing these reports, their websites, the sections detailing their values, their careers pages, their stated hiring processes.
Yeah.
It gives you a baseline. It tells you their public position, their described commitments, any initiatives they claim to have in place, and then comparing this stated intent with the EEO1 data. That can be very telling.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You've got the numbers from the EO1 on one hand and the narrative from their own reports on the other. Okay, so once you've gathered these pieces of public info, what does Dr. Jackson's analysis say is the crucial next phase?
The next phase is rigorous analysis. It's not just collecting the data points. It's about knowing how to look for patterns, potential red flags, things that align with potentially discriminatory practices.
Like digging deeper into those demographic disparities you mentioned from the EEO1 data.
Exactly. Quantifying those, understanding them, that's a major part of this analysis phase. But the research also guides you to look beyond just the raw numbers. It suggests examining the hiring processes themselves, as they're described publicly, or maybe through other means if possible. How are candidates sourced? What are the steps in their screening, their interview process? How are final decisions actually made?
That feels like it might require information that's much harder to get from the outside, though, doesn't it?
It certainly can be, yes, that's true. But the analysis posits you can start by scrutinizing what the company does make public about its process, what they choose to share. And importantly, it also highlights examining the job descriptions themselves. The language used, even seemingly innocent phrasing sometimes, can unintentionally deter or perhaps disadvantage candidates from certain groups.
Wow, that's a fascinating detail, that the actual language in a job posting could be a piece of this puzzle.
Oh, absolutely. It can reveal underlying assumptions or biases sometimes. The analysis also mentions that if, internal policy documents related to hiring or diversity ever become available somehow, reviewing those against their stated public commitments is, well, a powerful analytical step.
Okay, so you gather the public data, you analyze it, looking for these numerical gaps and maybe clues in the process description. What does the analysis outline if these steps do raise significant concerns? What's next?
Right. If the analysis of public data and company information suggests potential discrimination, the next step outlined is pursuing formal channels. Primarily, this means filing a complaint with an appropriate agency.
And the research points specifically to the EEOC first. Is that the main one?
Yes. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is presented as the primary federal avenue. The analysis notes they even have an online portal to initiate inquiries, schedule appointments, and then formally file a charge of discrimination.
Okay. Are there other agencies the analysis mentions that someone might turn to besides the EEOC?
It does mention others. The Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, the OFCCP, that's mentioned as the place to go if the company happens to be a federal contractor. They have specific oversight there. And state and local fair employment practices agencies are also noted as potential avenues, so offering options at different governmental levels.
Okay, right. So you've potentially initiated a formal process. The analysis then kind of pivots to what's needed to actually support a claim, the evidence. What kind of evidence does Dr. Jackson's research emphasize is, crucial here?
Yeah, this is where you definitely move beyond just the publicly reported numbers. The analysis highlights the need for specific, relevant documents.
Okay.
This means things like, actual job postings, applicant resumes, cover letters perhaps, candidate evaluation forms, internal emails, maybe discussing candidates, or even notes taken during interviews.
Accessing internal documents like candidate evaluations or emails, that seems like a major hurdle, unless you were maybe directly involved or the company's compelled to provide them somehow.
That's a really critical point. And obtaining these kinds of documents often requires the leverage that a formal investigation can provide, like one initiated by the EEOC through their discovery process. But beyond documents, the analysis also stresses the importance of witness testimony. Getting accounts from, say, other employees, former employees, maybe even applicants who have direct knowledge or perhaps witnessed potentially discriminatory actions or patterns.
Like eyewitness accounts of what happened during the hiring process itself.
Exactly. And finally, the analysis points to identifying direct evidence of bias, either within hiring decisions or maybe in the process leading up to them.
What would that look like?
Well, it could be explicit discriminatory comments made by hiring managers, maybe biased questions asked during interviews, or establishing a clear, undeniable pattern of exclusion or favoritism based on protected characteristics, even when qualifications seem pretty similar.
So it's not just about proving a statistical disparity, like from the EEO1 data, but showing how bias might have actually influenced the decisions or the process itself.
Precisely. The analysis really underscores the importance of showing that the process wasn't neutral, or that decisions weren't made solely on merit, but were somehow tainted by bias.
Wow. Navigating all of this, from data analysis to formal processes, evidence gathering, it sounds incredibly complex and potentially fraught, What's a sort of overarching recommendation or concluding thought from this analysis?
Well, the analysis strongly emphasizes seeking professional legal counsel, specifically an attorney specializing in employment law, especially once you've gathered significant evidence and are considering, formal action.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. You would absolutely need expert guidance to understand your rights, your options based on the specific circumstances of the situation.
Absolutely. The complexity of employment law really requires it. The analysis also adds a few key considerations right at the end that are just vital to understand.
Like confidentiality, is that one?
Yes, exactly. Maintaining confidentiality throughout the process, gathering information, filing complaints that's highlighted, and crucially, the potential for retaliation is explicitly mentioned as a serious concern for anyone raising these issues.
That possibility of retaliation, that's definitely worrying. It could put people off.
It is. It's a real risk. And the analysis doesn't shy away from acknowledging that. However, it immediately follows that point by noting a crucial protection. The EEOC provides specific protections against retaliation for individuals who file complaints or participate in investigations.
Oh, okay.
So while the risk exists, there are mechanisms designed to safeguard individuals.
That's a really critical counterbalance then. So the EEOC's role goes beyond just taking the complaint. They actively protect.
Absolutely. The analysis describes the EEOC's function as investigative. They look into the complaint. If they find probable cause that discrimination occurred, they then work towards resolution. This can involve attempts at mediation, or if resolution isn't reached, they actually have the power to pursue litigation themselves.
So they really act as the investigator, potential mediator, and even enforcer, depending on what they find.
That's the core role outlined in this research, yes. They are the agency tasked with scrutinizing these specific types of allegations within the employment context.
Okay, so pulling all of this together then, what does understanding this really detailed process, the one outlined in Dr. Jackson's analysis, what does it mean for you, the listener?
Well, I think it means that the seemingly impenetrable wall around a large company's hiring practices isn't entirely solid after all. This research provides a detailed blueprint, really. It shows you the specific public data points to look for, how to analyze them. It outlines the formal avenues available if concerns arise, the types of evidence needed to support a claim, and the crucial protective steps and resources, like the EEOC.
Yeah, it sort of transforms the challenge from what feels like an impossible mystery into something more like a structured investigation with defined steps, tools you can actually use.
Exactly. It clarifies a potential path forward based on rigorous analysis.
So thinking about this whole layered approach that the analysis reveals, from meticulously analyzing public data and corporate statements to potentially navigating formal complaint processes, gathering that hard to access internal evidence, needing legal expertise, all while being aware of the risk of retaliation, but also the protections. What does the sheer depth and, frankly, the complexity of this recommended process tell us about the ongoing struggle, the challenge to truly achieve equitable hiring practices, especially in these large organizations?